welcome, 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 welcome. We are about to start day 21, of our MLK UNCUT series. So here we go. We're also going on to Facebook Live. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to MLK UNCUT. We are on day 21 of reading. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And we're also reading aloud and alive on my YouTube channel, which is Church Love 333. You can subscribe to that channel to check out other videos that I don't do on Facebook Live, but there's plenty of content over on my page, Church Love 333. I'm going to go ahead and invite some people in. I know that this is a wonderful day that the Lord has made, and I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. I'm excited about who God is in my life, excited about what God is doing with his people all over the world. And we are continuing, as I said, into this read aloud of MLK's work. And I hope that you are getting something from these readings. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome. Thank you for joining in. And we're just excited about what God is doing. All right. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So we have been reading from Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And the purpose of reading from this is to help us to understand where we are in the United States in terms of these issues of civil rights, social justice, racial injustice. And in looking at MLK's work, we can kind of see where we have progressed, where we have not progressed, what are some of the same issues that have been happening, and get some perspective, because right now our media is definitely not providing us good perspective. And so we are actually moving toward the close of his reading, and we are now talking about his plans of where do we go from here. He's talking about the plans that were already proposed to help out those who are poor. MLK, what a lot of people don't seem to realize about him is that he didn't just have racial injustice in mind. He actually was talking about injustice across the board. He was focused on injustice for the poor, whether that was white, whether that was black, whether that was Latino community. And so in his reading, you'll see that he moves from just talking about racial injustice to talking about injustice as a whole. And a part of what he does in this particular book towards the end is he begins to talk about the programs that those working alongside him had actually been writing, the proposals that they had set forth. And these were given to our government to consider, to look at, to see if they could implement. So here we are in 2016, and everybody's asking all of these different questions about what are the plans, what were the proposals. The reality is these proposals were not put into place. They were not even looked at. So I see that as a failure in terms of where the civil rights movement kind of just went astray, really. I see it as, the government not really following through with some of the things that they said they would do in MLK's day. So this was, in case you don't know, this was the last book that he wrote before he was assassinated, which actually has an appendix of some of the plans that they proposed. So as we close out reading this book this week, you'll get an opportunity to hear what some of those proposals were. So that's where we are in terms of the reading. We are going to finish this book this week, and we will see where the Lord takes us. I've got a couple of books in mind, and so I'm just trying to decide where we're going to go with these read alouds. And where do we go from this book? So today he's going to talk basically about one of the proposals that they put forth for civil rights. In recent years, a multitude of civil rights programs have been elicited from specialists and scholars. To enhance their value and increase support for them, it is necessary that they be discussed and debated amongst the ordinary people affected by them. To facilitate study, I have grouped some of the more challenging proposals separately in an appendix to this volume. There is only one general proposal that I would like to examine here because it deals with the abolition of poverty within this nation and leads logically to my final discussion of poverty on an international scale. In the treatment of poverty nationally, one fact stands out. There are twice as many white poor as black poor in the United States. Therefore, I will not dwell on the experiences of poverty that derive from racial discrimination, but will discuss the poverty that affects whites and blacks alike. Up to recently, we have proceeded from a premise that poverty is a consequence of multiple evils: lack of education, restricting job opportunities, poor housing which stultified home life and suppressed initiative, fragile family relationships which distorted personality development. The logic of this approach suggested that each of these causes be attacked one by one. Hence, a housing program to transform living conditions, improve the educational facilities to furnish tools for better job opportunities, and family counseling to create better personal adjustments were designed. In combination, these measures were intended to remove the causes of poverty. While none of these remedies in itself is unsound, all have a fatal disadvantage. The programs have never proceeded on a coordinated basis or similar rates of development. Housing measures have fluctuated at the whims of legislative bodies. They have been piecemeal and pygmy. Educational reforms have been even more sluggish and entangled in bureaucratic stalling and economic-dominated decisions. Family assistance stagnated in neglect and then suddenly was discovered to be the central issue on the basis of hasty and superficial studies. At no time has a total, coordinated, and fully adequate program been conceived. As a consequence, fragmentary and spasmodic reforms have failed to reach down to the profoundest needs of the poor. In addition to the absence of coordination and sufficiency, the programs of the past all have another common failing. They are indirect. Each seeks to solve poverty by first solving something else. I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. Earlier in this century, this proposal would have been greeted with ridicule and denunciation as destructive of initiative and responsibility. At that time, economic status was considered the measure of the individual's abilities and talents. In the simplistic thinking of that day, the absence of worldly goods indicated a want of industrious habits and moral fiber. We've come a long way in our understanding of human motivation and of the blind operation of our economic system. Now we realize that dislocations in the market operation of our economy and the prevalence of discrimination thrust people into idleness and bind them in constant or frequent unemployment against their will. The poor are less often dismissed from our conscience today by being branded as inferior and incompetent. We also know that no matter how dynamically the economy develops and expands, it does not eliminate all poverty. We've come to the point where we must make the non-producer a consumer, or we will find ourselves drowning in a sea of consumer goods. We have so energetically mastered production that now we must give attention to distribution. Though there have been increases in purchasing power, they have lagged behind increases in production. Those at the lowest economic level, the poor, white, and black, the aged and chronically ill, are traditionally unorganized and therefore have little ability to force the necessary growth in their income. They stagnate or become even poorer in relation to the larger society. The problem indicates that our emphasis must be twofold. We must create full employment or we must create incomes. People must be made consumers by one method or the other. Once they are placed in this position, we need to be concerned that the potential of the individual is not wasted. New forms of work that enhance the social goodwill have to be devised for those for whom traditional jobs are not available. So even if you recall in one of our previous readings, MLK began to talk about this shift from even the age that we were in, moving into the technological age. And he was saying that if you don't have the skills to move into the next age, which is technology, that those who had skills that were employable in the past, they would find themselves not being employable in the future. So again, he's talking about being able to create full employment for people and being able to create new forms of jobs so that these people would stay working, right, and still have a way to earn income. So what do we have going on right now? We've got an incredibly high unemployment rate, but also that has to do with some of the agreements that we have made that ships production, that ships jobs out of the United States. So that has to be addressed by whoever becomes president, creating jobs and not creating piecemeal jobs where people are working 3 jobs to get 40 hours, right? They need to be able to have full-time employment, full-time sustainable employment that's not working them to death for the same amount of hours that they were working before. All right, let's keep reading. In 1879, Henry George anticipated this state of affairs when he wrote, "In Progress and Poverty, the fact is that the work which improves the condition of mankind, the work which extends knowledge and increases power and enriches literature and elevates thought, is not done to secure a living. It is not the work of slaves driven to their task either by the lash of a master or by animal necessities. It is the work of men who perform it for their own sake, and not that they may get more to eat or drink or wear or display. In a state of society where want is abolished, work of this sort could be enormously increased. We are likely to find that the problems of housing and education, instead of preceding the elimination of poverty, will themselves be affected if poverty is first abolished. The poor transformed into purchasers will do a great deal on their own to alter housing decay. Negroes who have a double disability will have a greater effect on discrimination when they have the additional weapon of cash to use in their struggle. Beyond these advantages, a host of positive psychological changes results from widespread economic security. The dignity of the individual will flourish when the decisions concerning his life are in his own hands, when he has the assurance that his income is stable and certain, and when he knows that he has the means to seek self-improvement. Personal conflicts between husband, wife, and children will diminish when the unjust measurement of human worth on a scale of dollars is eliminated. 2 conditions are indispensable if we are to ensure that the guaranteed income operates as a consistently progressive measure. First, it must be pegged to the median income of society, not at the lowest levels of income. To guarantee an income at the floor would simply perpetuate welfare standards and freeze into the society poverty conditions. Second, the guaranteed income must be dynamic. It must automatically increase as the total social income grows. Were it permitted to remain static under growth conditions, the recipients would suffer a relative decline. If periodic reviews disclose that the whole national income has risen, then the guaranteed income would have to be adjusted upward by the same percentage. Without these safeguards, a creeping retrogression would occur, nullifying the gains of security and stability. This proposal is not a civil rights program in the sense that the term is currently used. The program would benefit all of the poor, including the 2/3 of them who are white. I hope that both Negro and white will act in coalition to effect this change, because their combined strength will be necessary to overcome the fierce opposition we must realistically anticipate. Our nation's adjustment to a new mode of thinking will be facilitated if we realize that for nearly 40 years, 2 groups in our society have already been enjoying a guaranteed income. Indeed, it is a symptom of our confused social values that these two groups turn out to be the richest and the poorest. The wealthy who own securities have always had an assured income, and their polar opposite, the relief client, has been guaranteed an income, however minuscule, through welfare benefits. John Kenneth Galbraith has estimated that $20 billion a year would affect a guaranteed income, which he describes as not much more than we spend for the next fiscal year to rescue freedom and democracy and religious liberty as these are defined by experts in Vietnam. The contemporary tendency in our society is to base our distribution on scarcity, which has vanished, and to compress our abundance into the overfed mouths of the middle and upper classes until they gag. If democracy is to have breadth of meaning, it is necessary to adjust this inequity. It is not only moral, but it is also intelligent. We are wasting and degrading human life by clinging to archaic thinking. The curse of poverty has no justification in our age. It is socially as cruel and blind as the practice of cannibalism at of civilization, when men ate each other because they had not yet learned to take food from the soil or to consume the abundant animal life around them. The time has come for us to civilize ourselves by the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty. So in MLK's day, he believed that this could be that what he calls the guaranteed income could be a way of eliminating poverty. In other words, instead of spending all of this money on, at his time was the Vietnam War, instead of spending all of this money on the war, you could have spent that money on a guaranteed income for those who were at a certain economic level, to eliminate that level of poverty in the United States and to begin to help people become upwardly mobile, helping them to find meaningful jobs full time. And as a matter of fact, I believe recently I just heard about a similar plan that was approved by Paul Ryan and a Democratic representative called 10-20-30. And you can actually go look that up, where they began to say that we can allocate, I believe it was 10% of federal funds to those who are 20% of our population that's living, I guess, below the poverty line for 30 years. So that's why it's called 10-20-30. But again, MLK was proposing something very similar to that over 40 years ago, and it got ignored. So that's what he talked about as a beginning point, that, as you heard him say, there is no justification in our age and day for the curse of poverty still being what it is. And I'm going to move into the beginning of what he calls the world house, the world house. And so he is going to talk a little bit about taking these ideas of poverty and ending poverty and beginning to expand that idea to the world. So let's take a look at what MLK has to say as we move into his last chapter called The World House. Some years ago, a famous novelist died. Among his papers was found a list of suggested plots for future stories, the most prominently underscored being this one. A widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. This is the great new problem of mankind. We have inherited a large house, a great world house in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. However deeply American Negroes are caught in the struggle to be at last at home in our homeland of the United States, we cannot ignore the larger world house in which we are also dwellers. Equality with whites will not solve the problems of either whites or Negroes if it means equality in a world society stricken by poverty and in a universe doomed to extinction by war. All inhabitants of the globe are now neighbors. This worldwide neighborhood has been brought into being largely as a result of the modern scientific and technological revolutions. The world of today is vastly different from the world of just 100 years ago. A century ago, Thomas Edison had not yet invented the incandescent lamp to bring light to many dark places of the earth. The Wright brothers had not yet invented that fascinating mechanical bird that would spread its gigantic wings across the skies and soon dwarf distance and place, time in the service of man. Einstein had not yet challenged an axiom, and the theory of relativity had not yet been posited. Human beings searching a century ago as now for better understanding had no television, no radio, no telephone, no motion pictures through which to communicate. Medical science had not yet discovered the wonder drugs to end dreaded plagues and diseases. 100 years ago, military men had not yet developed the terrifying weapons of warfare that we know today. Not the bomber, an airborne fortress raining down death, nor napalm, that burner of all things and flesh in its path. A century ago, there were no skyscraping buildings to kiss the stars, no gargantuan bridges to span the waters. Science had not yet peered into the ranges of interstellar space, nor had it penetrated oceanic depths. All these new inventions, these new ideas, these sometimes fascinating and sometimes frightening developments came later. Most of them have come within the past 60 years, sometimes with agonizing slowness and more characteristically with speed, but always with significance for our future. The years ahead will see a continuation of the same dramatic developments. Physical science will carve new highways through the stratosphere. In a few years, astronauts and cosmonauts will probably walk comfortably across the uncertain pathways of the moon. In 2 or 3 years, it will be possible, because of new supersonic jets, to fly from New York to London in 2.5 hours. In the years ahead, medical science will greatly prolong the lives of men by finding a cure for cancers and deadly heart ailments. Automation and cybernation will make it possible for working people to have undreamed of amounts of time, leisure time. All of this is a dazzling picture of the furniture, the workshop, the spacious rooms, the new decorations, and the architectural pattern of the large world house in which we are living. Along with the scientific and technological revolution, we have also witnessed a worldwide freedom revolution over the last few decades. The present upsurge of the Negro people of the United States grows out of a deep and passionate determination to make freedom and equality a reality here and now. In one sense, the civil rights movement in the United States is a special American phenomenon, which must be understood in light of American history and dealt with in terms of the American situation. But on another and more important level, what is happening in the United States today is a significant part of a world development. We live in a day, said the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, when civilization is shifting its basic outlook, a major turning point in history where the presuppositions on which society is structured are being analyzed, sharply challenged, and profoundly changed. What we are seeing now is a freedom explosion, the idea of an idea whose time has come. The deep rumbling of discontent that we hear today is the thunder of disinherited masses rising from dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. In one majestic chorus, the rising masses are singing, in the words of our freedom song, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around." All over the world like a fever, freedom is spreading in the widest liberation movement in history. The great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and their lands. Now, he is writing this almost 40 years ago, not 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And we see in our current society, the great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and their lands. This is still going on. Look at what's happening. I don't know if you've been paying attention to it, but look at what's happening with the Indian reservation and the people who are saying we are willing to stay out here as long as it takes to get people to stop trying to put a pipeline through our land. So again, this continual fight of ending exploitation is still ongoing. It hasn't stopped. They are awake and moving toward their goal like a tidal wave. You can hear them rumbling in every village, street, on the docks, in the houses, among the students, in the churches, and at political meetings. For several centuries, the direction of history flowed from the nations and societies of Western Europe out into the rest of the world in conquests of various sorts. That period, the era of colonialism, is at an end. East is moving west. The earth is being redistributed. Yes, we are shifting our basic outlooks. So the earth is being redistributed. There are some people that don't want that to happen. There are some people who are fearful of the earth being redistributed, and what does that redistribution look like? But I believe, as MLK certainly believed, that it was a divine redistribution that would occur. So let's keep reading. These developments should not surprise any student of history. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. The Bible tells the thrilling story of how Moses stood in Pharaoh's court centuries ago and cried, "Let my people go." This was an opening chapter in a continuing story. The present struggle in the United States is a later chapter in the same story. Something within has reminded the Negro of his birthright of freedom, and something without has reminded him that it can be gained. Consciously or unconsciously, he has been caught up by the spirit of the time, and with his black brothers of Africa, his brown and yellow brothers in Asia, South America, and the Caribbean, the United States Negro is moving with a sense of great urgency toward the promised land of racial and economic justice. Nothing could be more tragic than for men to live in these revolutionary times and fail to achieve the new attitude and mental outlook that the situation demands. In Washington Irving's familiar story of Rip Van Winkle, the one thing that we usually remember is that Rip slept for 20 years. There's another important point, however, that is almost always overlooked. It was the sign on the inn in the little town on the Hudson from which Rip departed and scaled the mountain for his long sleep. When he went up, the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down 20 years later, the sign had a picture of George Washington. As he looked at the picture of the first president of the United States, Rip was confused, flustered, and lost. He knew not who Washington was. The most striking thing about this story is not that Rip slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution that would alter the course of human history. One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent, who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. But today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. That'll preach all by itself. While there's a revolution going on, are you asleep or are you awake? The large house in which we live demands that we transform this worldwide neighborhood into a worldwide brotherhood. Together we must learn to live as brothers, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. Now, people love to quote that last sentence from Martin Luther King, but put it in context. Put it in context. He's saying our survival as people, as human beings, depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. This large house that we live in, he's talking about the world house, demands that we transform our worldwide neighborhood into thinking of ourselves as a worldwide brotherhood. Together we must learn to live as brothers, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. He continues on and says, we must work passionately and tirelessly to bridge the gulf between our scientific progress and our moral progress. And this is where his writing starts making people itch in places that they didn't itch before. One of the great problems of mankind is that we suffer from a poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. And we certainly see almost 50 years later that we haven't, as a nation, we have not as a nation gotten better morally or spiritually. That's just the honest truth, right? There has been pockets of awakening, but there hasn't been an overhaul of the American mindset and the American conscience that says, you know what? We're on our way to hell in a handbasket, and maybe we should seek the Lord as a nation, right? We had the 9/11 thing that happened in 2001? But think about it. It's 2016. Are we in a better state morally as a nation after that event happened? After everybody said we need God in America again? What did we do? We cried out temporarily, but then we kind of went back to our own ways as a nation and a people. I'll continue to read on here. He says, every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means of which we live. Our problem today is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. So much of modern life can be summarized in that suggestive phrase of Thoreau: improved means to an unimproved end. So yeah, we can be improving our technology, but our spirit is not being improved. This is the serious predicament, the deep and haunting problem confronting modern man. Enlarged material powers spell enlarged peril if there is not proportionate growth of the soul. When the external of man's nature subjugates the internal, clouds begin to form. Western civilization is particularly vulnerable at this moment, for our material abundance has brought us neither peace of mind nor serenity of the spirit. An Asian writer has portrayed our dilemma in these truthful terms. You call your 1,000 material devices labor-saving machinery, yet you are forever busy. With the multiplying of your machinery, you grow increasingly fatigued, anxious, nervous, and dissatisfied. Whatever you have, you want more. And wherever you are, you want to go somewhere else. Your devices are neither time-saving nor soul-saving machinery. There are so many sharp spurs which urge you on to invent more machinery and to do more business. This tells us something about our civilization that cannot be cast aside as a prejudiced charge by an Eastern thinker who is jealous of Western prosperity. We cannot escape this indictment. In closing, this does not mean that we turn back the clock of scientific progress. No one can overlook the wonders that science has wrought for our lives. The automobile will not abdicate in favor of the horse and buggy, the train in favor of the stagecoach, or the tractor in favor of the hand plow. or the scientific method in favor of ignorance and superstition, but our moral and spiritual lag must be redeemed. When scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men. When we foolishly minimize the internal of our lives and maximize the external, we sign the warrant of our own day of doom. Our hope for creative living in this world house that we have inherited lies in our ability to reestablish the moral ends of our lives in personal character and social justice. Without this spiritual and moral reawakening, we shall destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments. Hear what MLK is saying. If our material wealth, if our scientific advances, if our technology supersedes our moral life, our moral power is what he's saying, we can destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments. This man is writing this 47 years ago, 49 years ago. Where are we today? Now, mind you, people threw plenty of tomatoes at MLK for saying unpopular things. A prophet is usually not respected in his generation. But he was right. If we do not reawaken spiritually and morally, and he's not just talking about revival, because if we have personal revival going on, we will have national awakening. But he warned, he said, if we do not reawaken, you will destroy yourself by misusing your own instruments. Your own instruments of technology will lead you so far away morally. Yes, 49 years ahead in the prophetic. Your own instruments that you're creating will lead you so far away from God. You will outrun your moral power. And I think that is a prophetic word that our generation needs to hear. Don't allow your skill to supersede your moral power. Don't allow your skill with technology to outrun your moral power, your personal integrity, your spiritual life. When people say, get your life, please get your life, keep your life. And remember that your life is sustained in Christ. It's not sustained by the tools that you use. Your life is sustained by the presence of a holy God living on the inside of you. And I know people are looking like, why is this girl reading from MLK? But this is what the Lord told me to read from. He said, pick it up, read it aloud, and redistribute some common sense back into the earth. Because clearly we're losing it, right? I'll read it again, his last couple statements. He said, when scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men. One of the fears right now is who's going to be in control of guided missiles come January 2017. Are we going to have misguided people in control of guided missiles in our country because we allow our moral power to be overrun by technological advances? Are we going to destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments because we're so smart? We're so smart that we can't figure out that we must, as he said, as he begins to talk about this world house, we must live together or perish as fools. So at some point, yeah, together we must learn to live as brothers, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. War can only take you so far. MLK and others like him were developing plans to help end the scourge of poverty. As he said, in this day and age, with the technological advances that we have, there's no justification for poverty except one. And we're going to get to the one justification of poverty still left. Hopefully we get to it by Friday, because we're going to finish this. We will finish this book this week. But there is no moral justification for keeping poverty going. Not with all the ways that we can create food. Not with all the ways that we can irrigate deserts. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you are getting something out of the reading. I hope that you are learning. And this concludes today's reading. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about God's children depriving each other. God's children depriving each other. And what has happened to us morally, that we are in this state of God's children depriving each other. So hope that you're having a great day. If you are home today for the Labor Day, hope that you are getting some rest. Hope that you are having an opportunity to seek the Lord and all of that great and wonderful stuff. I will be on Periscope this week, and I will be sharing about genius. We're going to be looking at some things concerning genius. So if you're interested in any of that, you can follow me on Periscope at Life Nation, all lowercase. You can find our page and you can follow us and get live and get notifications of when we go live to talk about that. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, Apostle Reed, being on, Missionary Minister Elizabeth, Prophet Lakia, and Prophet Priscilla. Thank you all for being on live with me today, and Apostle Robert, who is in the next room but still working. So thank you all again for joining me this morning, and I hope that you have a great and wonderful day. Take care, and God bless. Again, thank you all for joining me on YouTube Live, and this was day 21. Take care, and God bless.